Hey guys, Pastor Barry here of Calvary Chapel, Tustin. And as we approach today's Prophecy in the News update, I was thinking back really in my own life and being raised in a Christian home and having heard the Word of God quite literally my whole life, as far back as I can remember, being in church and listening to the Word of God taught week after week. When I was 12 years old, I read a book called The Late Great Planet Earth, and it was about prophecy, and it really changed my life, quite literally, changed my eternal destiny too. Because the Bible then became something to me that wasn't just simply history and stories about Jesus, as wonderful as they are, but it also told me that the Bible has a capacity to predict the future and tell of future events with stunning accuracy. And there, I think, in lies the value of doing what we're doing today and considering what the Bible has written thousands of years ago. And we live in a privileged time where we're actually watching these things happen. Things that have never before happened in history are happening all over the world, and they were prophesied by men like Isaiah and Zechariah and Joel and, of course, John and Revelation and the many things that he wrote about that we're now watching unfold. Now, as we look to these things, I think one point of recognition is not all of them are amazingly sensational or astounding in their nature, like the coalition of Ezekiel 38 and 39 now forming. I mean, that's big news. That's something major that we can really look at and see quite clearly. And as well as Jerusalem being a burdensome stone, as Zechariah prophesied in chapter 12. Watching the world and UNESCO and the UN turn against the nation of Israel, that also tells us, this is something big, this is major, something easily definable and discernible. But there's a lot of spokes on the wheel of prophecy as well that are happening, and I want to talk to you about three of them today that are going on, one of them going on right now as we speak, and that is the elections in Iran. Now, some say this is just simply a facade. There's nothing really to these elections, but there are two candidates who are running who have basically not necessarily opposite, but distinct platforms. The president at this point in time of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, has been pushing himself as a moderate. He wants to be more westernized. He wants to have more freedoms in the country. And now he's running up against one who has strong support. Hassan Rouhani, last time he ran, he won hands down. He won handily and defeated all of his opponents. But now he's getting a push from a man named Ibrahim Raisi. And he is indeed a friend of the Ayatollah. And back in 1980, after the Iranian Revolution, he sat as a judge and he condemned many political prisoners who stood against the newly founded regime to death. So this man is an extremist. And this is important prophetically because what it tells us is that the further radicalization of this theocracy that we know as the Islamic State of Iran is going to increase in the last days, and their fervor and passion for dealing with the Zionists, the great Satan of the United States, and the little Satan of Israel is going to increase in the last days of prophetic necessity. And this should Raisi win this election, this will be a further move toward radicalization. He's supported by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. He is a friend of the Ayatollah Khamenei, who actually runs the country, but he is the spiritual leader of the nation, and he leans a little bit more towards the extremist side, and as I mentioned, even in his past role in punishing what they deem to be dissidents or enemies of the Iranian state. So now we've got a move going on in Iran of really major proportions, even though it's a small spoke on the wheel, possibly leading to the further aggressive posture of the Iranian regime that we've been watching develop over the last decade plus, and really since 1979 and the Islamic Revolution, which really, to a degree, changed the world. Now, we've also got another move going on today that is quite interesting, and this involves the EU. And I'll remind you that the book of Daniel talks about the fact that there's going to be a revived Roman Empire. Revelation talks about 10 nations that are established under the rule and reign of the Antichrist, and this coalition is going to form during the tribulation period. We know that for sure, under the guise and direction of the Antichrist. But we also know, much like other things that happen in prophecy, there's precursors or events that lead up to the ultimate fulfillment that takes place during the tribulation. One of them that is happening today is that Federica Mogherini, who is the defense minister for the EU, has been pushing for an actual physical headquarters for an EU army or a military arm of the EU. Now, the 28 nations involved, and now that leaves Britain within that circle for the time being until the Brexit in 2019, but they are expecting Britain to participate in this new military formed alliance, creating a solidarity, if you will, militarily within the geographic region of the world known as the Old Roman Empire. As I said, it's going to be revived in the last days, and as we see movements toward what's going to happen during the tribulation, we would fully expect to see things such as this. These very people groups, these geographic regions of the world uniting together in a military alliance, because from that military alliance is going to come a man who leads the world during the tribulation period. He's called the beast in Revelation 13, and we often refer to him as the Antichrist, or the one against Christ, who is actually going to resolve a lot of the issues in the Middle East, including the rebuilding of the temple. And interesting that we've seen some moves out of Emmanuel Macron, the newly elected president of France, who has stated that he is going to not be a supporter of a Palestinian state, which is going to gain him favor. He is one of the leading members, along with Angela Merkel, of the EU. It's going to gain him favor with the nation of Israel. The two-state solution is not something that's acceptable or possible in his mind, and this is going to be the same type of movement we're going to see from that man of sin, as the Bible calls him, who's going to rise to power. So again, we see interesting movements with the Iranian election, potentially a radical getting into office of the president, really a puppet of the Ayatollah Khamenei, and we're also seeing movement within what could be the bones or the structure of the revived Roman Empire happening on a more unprecedented scale, now moving together militarily. And we also have an interesting thing coming up. The President of the United States is going to make his first visit to the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia and other nations, but Israel is high, obviously, on his priority list. And we know last week that a low-level employee who was basically working on arrangements for the president's visit when he arrives in Israel made a comment to Israeli officials that the Western Wall, or the Kotel, is disputed territory, and there's really no right of the Jews to lay claim to it. And this has created a lot of angst in Israel, and it's created some concern among Israeli leaders as well as citizens. And yet the White House today is now distancing itself from these statements, saying that this low-level consulate employee was just speaking of his own mind and opinion, and he wasn't representing the position of the United States, and certainly not of this current administration. There's also talk coming out of Israel that there's going to be a decision made after Trump's visit to Israel concerning the move of the embassy, the U.S. embassy, from Tel Aviv, which is not the capital of Israel, to the city of Jerusalem. So we're seeing some expectations that are prophetic in nature, that are happening and on the horizon once again, even with this visit of our president to the nation of Israel. And we know he's going to spend time with Netanyahu. We know that there's been some discussion as to whether or not Netanyahu will visit the Kotel or the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall with Trump when he arrives there, because the tradition is to go with a rabbi because it is a spiritual place of great significance. Yet a statement would be made to the world about the U.S. intentions with the nation of Israel and their future if Netanyahu were to join our president, Donald Trump, at the Western Wall. So again, we see Israel making their way into the news. We see the Temple Mount being a portion of the focus, which is a significant event prophetically. But these kind of, if you will, if I can borrow a term or a phrase from What About Bob, these are baby steps. These are small incremental movements that have potential to lead to something greater that's long been prophesied by the prophets of old. So again, very exciting times to be alive, and I hope that you are a student who is interested in prophecy, because it does encourage us, it does strengthen us, and we know that prophecy has not been given to frighten us, but it's been given to prepare us. So we're ready for the things that Jesus said are coming when it's time for us to look up. So once again, this is Barry Stagner. I hope that you give a like and subscribe to our page as we continue to update you on the events happening around the world, both big and small, as they pertain to Bible prophecy. And remember, the book of Revelation tells us that Jesus himself is the spirit of prophecy. We should never disparage or discourage the study of prophecy, as we are living in a sign-rich environment that tells us Jesus is coming for his church soon, and then 7 years or so later, he's going to return with his church to rule and reign over the world. And all the signs are happening all around us. So once again, may the Lord bless your day as you prepare for his return for his church. So I'll see you, as the old saying goes, here, there, or in the air. God bless you.